It all started peacefully until Sarah, my friend, casually mentioned something I couldn't forget. She said my husband had some kind of relationship with a student, and the way they looked at each other was different. At first, I laughed it off, thinking she was just overthinking. But when my husband admitted his feelings for her, I didn't know what to do. Why do I feel so conflicted? Could it be that I'm losing myself in this relationship? We met for the first time as freshmen. He was an intelligent, handsome guy with a unique charm. As for me, I was just an ordinary girl, not overly striking, but lucky enough to find someone who loved me deeply. We quickly became best friends, and gradually our feelings for each other grew into love. We couldn't stay apart. He was always there to support me with my studies, and we faced all the challenges of student life together. We shared everything, from dreams and aspirations to the joys and sorrows of life. In our final year of college, when I realized I couldn't live without him, I decided to take the next step in our relationship. I wanted to build a future together, a little family, and so did he. Everything went like a fairy tale. We graduated, found stable jobs, and eventually got married. Our wedding wasn't extravagant, but it was filled with love and warmth. Our friends and family were happy and wished us well. In 2020, we welcomed our daughter into the world. It was the happiest time of my life. No matter how busy work got, he always made time for our family. I could feel his love and care every day. He was an amazing father, always taking care of our daughter, and a partner I couldn't live without. Those months were perfect, and I felt incredibly fortunate to have such a complete family. My husband is a very serious person when it comes to work. After graduation, he became a lecturer at a prestigious medical school. He is also a doctor, highly skilled and respected by many students. I was always proud of him, of the achievements he had made in his career. Every day, watching him stand at the lectern and share knowledge with the students, I felt lucky to have him as my husband. However, there was one person, Sarah, who worked with him at the same university. She was intelligent, sharp, and quite close to my husband. I had known her over the years, but we weren't always close. She was diligent and had good relationships with her colleagues, especially with my husband. Sometimes we'd meet for coffee, chatting about life and work. One afternoon, Sarah invited me out for lunch. She seemed worried, not like her usual self. We ate and exchanged our usual cheerful conversations, but Sarah kept glancing at me in a way that made me feel uneasy. Finally, she hesitantly said something I can't forget. "I think your husband might be involved with one of his students." Sarah's words left me stunned. I didn't know how to react, so I just laughed lightly and tried to keep my composure. I thought maybe Sarah was overthinking things, that she was imagining things that weren't real. But I couldn't deny that the doubt had started creeping into my mind, even though I didn't want to admit it. As soon as I got home, I tried to push the thoughts of what Sarah had said out of my head, but they lingered. My husband was still the same, spending time with our daughter, helping me with household tasks. But then I began to pay closer attention to his every move. Every time he smiled at his phone, every time he was absent for a little longer than usual while working, I couldn't help but wonder if he was hiding something. A week later, I ran into Sarah at a cafe. She seemed very serious when she brought up the topic again, this time without hesitation. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I think you need to know," she said. "I've seen the way he looks at her. It's the same way he used to look at you when you were first together. She looks at him like he's everything, and he looks at her with the same look he used to give you, like in a romantic movie." Sarah's words were a shock, and I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. My husband had never shown that kind of affection toward anyone except me. But was it possible that I had been too trusting? Had I been too blind to see the signs of feelings that couldn't be controlled? From then on, I began to observe him more carefully. One evening, when we were having dinner together, I felt the air between us had changed. He smiled, but it wasn't the smile I was used to. He seemed distant, lost in thought. I could feel a growing gap between us. I decided that I had to ask him about it. One night, when it was just the two of us at home, I sat across from him and couldn't hold back my curiosity any longer. "Are you thinking about someone else?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, even though inside, I was burning with anxiety. He looked at me, a bit surprised, then fell silent for a moment. I could see the distraction in his eyes. I couldn't wait any longer, so I pressed on. Are you thinking about her? That student Sarah mentioned? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lowered his gaze and let out a deep sigh. The whole room seemed heavy with silence. I didn't know what to expect from him, but a sense of dread began to fill me. Perhaps I had already known the answer, but I couldn't bear the silence. Finally, he spoke, and what he said left me speechless. I can't stop thinking about her, he admitted, his voice nearly breaking. I've tried, truly tried, but I can't. His admission hit me like a hard slap to the face. The whole room felt suffocating, heavy with tension. I didn't know how to react. Everything suddenly became unclear. He said he had tried, but I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand why he couldn't get past this. At that moment, there was only one question in my mind. Why her? She was just a student, and I was his wife, the mother of his child. Why couldn't he love me the way he used to? I sat in silence, unsure of what to do. It felt like everything around me was crumbling. Our daughter was upstairs, playing, completely unaware that my world was falling apart. Do you love her? I asked, my voice dry and raspy. He hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. It's not that I don't love you, but I can't stop thinking about her. I know I can't have a relationship with her, but I can't stop feeling this way. I saw the pain in his eyes, the inner turmoil between his mind and emotions. It wasn't betrayal, but it was a conflict that seemed impossible to resolve. I had imagined a life with him, a happy family where everything was stable, and now I realized that everything I had imagined was just a fantasy. I felt like I was losing control. I didn't know who I was in this relationship anymore. I once thought I was the only one he needed, that I was the most important person in his life, but now I realized I wasn't the only one. This feeling, it hurt so much. I stood up, not knowing where to go, just wanting to escape the room, to escape his conflicted gaze. I couldn't take it anymore. Can you live without her? I asked, though I didn't want to know the answer. He didn't answer immediately, just stood there in silence as if contemplating it. Finally, he sighed. I don't know. I honestly don't know. Those words were like a sharp knife cutting through my heart. Why didn't he know? Why couldn't he be sure that I was the one he needed? I wanted to scream, to ask him all the questions that had been building up inside me. But I couldn't. I could only stand there, silently looking at him, unable to say anything more. And in that moment of silence, I realized something. I couldn't keep living in this uncertainty. We needed to have an honest conversation, to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. But could I forgive him? Could he come back and love me the way he used to? All those questions weighed heavily on me, but I knew I had to confront them. The next day, I decided I could no longer avoid the situation. I had been living in uncertainty for too long, and I couldn't continue like this. I needed to have a clear conversation with him, no more silence. We couldn't keep avoiding it and live in a relationship without clarity. I returned to our house, the place that used to be filled with laughter and happiness. But now it felt cold and still, like a lifeless room. He was there, sitting in the living room, reading a book, and as usual, our daughter was playing in her room. When I entered, he looked at me, but said nothing. The silence between us seemed to stretch on forever. Finally, I spoke. Can you explain everything? My voice was firm, though inside, I was just a fragile person trying to keep it together. He looked at me, his eyes full of exhaustion, as if he had been preparing for this confrontation for a long time. He nodded and sighed. You can ask anything, he said, his voice low and serious. I'll answer honestly. I started with the biggest question on my mind. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why did you hide this instead of telling me when it first started? He was silent for a long time, as if trying to find the right words to express what he was feeling. I don't know. I was afraid of hurting you. I didn't want to make you suffer. I thought if I kept silent, maybe it would fade away on its own. But it didn't go as I imagined. His words seemed sincere, but I couldn't control the anger rising inside me. What were you thinking? I couldn't hold back. Did you think I didn't deserve to know the truth? Did you think I would forgive you just because you didn't physically cheat? He stood up, walking toward me, and I saw the pain clearly on his face. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted, his eyes filled with regret. I tried to stay away from these feelings, but I couldn't control them. I love you, I still love you, but I can't stop thinking about her. Those words felt like a knife to my heart. I had always believed that the love between us was enough, that nothing could shake our relationship. But now, I felt like a fool, trusting in a love that I wasn't sure still existed. I looked at him, my heart heavy. "So what are you going to do?" I asked, my voice dry. "Are you going to keep living with her in your mind and leave me here in this unclear relationship?" He shook his head, tears in his eyes. "I don't want you to live in this pain, but I can't just erase these feelings. I know I've let you down, and I'm sorry." Silence enveloped the room. I didn't know what to say anymore. I wanted a clear answer. I wanted to know if we could still repair this or not. But everything felt so complicated, and I wasn't sure if we could find the love we once had. I looked into his eyes, trying to find a glimmer of hope, but all I saw was exhaustion and despair. We needed time to think, and I realized that healing couldn't happen overnight. The feeling of helplessness overwhelmed me, and I understood that I would have to make a decision for myself in the days to come. I spent many days thinking, asking myself whether I could continue living with him, with the uncertainty, with the complex feelings he was carrying in his heart. The questions kept nagging at me. Could I forgive him? Could we find the love we once had? Could I continue living in this ambiguity, while he was struggling with his own emotions? Every time I looked at our daughter, my heart felt like it was breaking. I didn't want her to grow up in a family where conflict and pain were things she would have to witness. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the hurt I was carrying inside. I had once been the loving wife, the devoted mother, but now I felt like I was losing myself. We hadn't spoken about what had happened for an entire week. He still came over to see our daughter, and we exchanged brief pleasantries about everyday life. No one mentioned what had happened between us, as if it were something untouchable. But I knew, both he and I could feel the tension, the discomfort in the air. It felt like we were living in two different worlds, one person trying to hold on to what was left, and the other trying to get back what had been lost. I decided that I needed to talk to him again. A real conversation, not just avoidance, but facing the truth. I couldn't keep living in this uncertainty. I needed to know if there was still a chance to save our relationship, and if he really wanted to come back to me, or if it was just a fading connection. That day, I called him to come over. When he arrived, I was ready. There was no more hiding. I wasn't afraid to face the truth anymore. I looked at him, trying to stay calm. "We need to be clear about everything that's happened," I said, my voice firm but betraying the pain I felt inside. "You need to decide. What do you want from me? And do you still love me?" He sat down, his eyes filled with regret and exhaustion. "I don't know what to say anymore," he admitted, his voice sinking lower. "I love you, but I can't stop thinking about her. I know I've made a mistake. I don't deserve you, but I can't erase these feelings." It felt like everything was falling apart. I had once thought that he would come back, that he would love me like before, and we would get through this challenge together. But now, I understood that love can't be forced. His feelings for me were no longer the same, and I couldn't live in that lie anymore. "I don't know what I'll do next," I said, my heart aching, "but I need to think about myself, about what I truly deserve." We sat in silence, no one saying anything more. I looked at him, no longer seeing the husband I had once loved and trusted, and in that moment I realized that sometimes loving someone doesn't mean staying with them forever. Love can change, and I needed to find myself again within this relationship.